One of the best ways to learn the white on black shading technique is what I call the water droplet activity. And I'm gonna show you guys in this video how to complete that step by step. So the first thing that we need to do is put a 1-inch border on this piece of paper like we have done before. So using a white Prismacolor pencil, we're going to do the same method where we just put the dot on either side and go across like this. All right, now before we do anything in the picture plane right here, we're gonna do like we did with the graphite and practice with the value scale up top. So we're gonna evenly divide this into 1-inch sections, and you can see the one on the left and right are already done because of the border. So all we have to do is line the ruler up across here and put a mark on the 2, the 3, and the 4. We're gonna do the same on the top, like this. And then we are going to connect those as well. Okay, now just like with graphite, we are going to follow a very specific process to make sure that all of the values in this scale stair step as equally as possible from pure black to pure white. So the way that we're gonna set this one up is the pure black is going to be on the left side. So no matter what, we're not gonna add any of the white on this square right here. We're gonna leave that black. And on the right, we are going to have full pressure. So it really makes the most sense to begin with this one. And you'll notice as you do this process, the pencil gets dull very quickly. So always make sure that you have one of these manual pencil sharpeners on hand and you use the larger of the two holes to sharpen it. But we wanna make sure that we have a very sharp pencil tip so that we don't get these weird sort of dull marks as we're working. And this is a reversal of how we've done things in the past, of course, where with regular graphite drawing, we think of adding more pressure as adding the darker areas, but here it's the opposite, where the more pressure we add, the lighter the areas are gonna be. And we would start in a lighter section rather than a darker section. Okay, so with this, we really have our work cut out for us now because we have those bookends established. Once again, the lightest light, the darkest dark. The next place that I like to go to from here is the second darkest square. And this is gonna be the hardest one to get just by virtue of how carefully we have to control our pressure on the pencil. So where on this one, where I was pushing super hard, I was really choking up on the pencil. Here, I find it's better to loosely grasp the pencil from the back and not even think about pushing down per se, but just letting the pencil, like just that tip of the pencil glide on the paper without really pressing down at all. So I'm gonna make sure my pencil is nice and sharp. And later on, I may think, you know, I need to add a little bit more value to this. I need to lighten it up, and that's fine because you can always add more to it. But once you've added that white, you can't really erase it because this is a wax-based pigment. So it's not like graphite where you can kind of go back and change things. Pretty much what's done is done with this. So you have to be very careful to layer very slowly as you get lighter and lighter. All right, that looks about done. You'll notice that there is a little bit of grain and it's not entirely smooth. A lot of that is just the grain of the paper, which makes it a bit harder when you're trying to shade something smooth, but it will make it a lot faster for the kind of animal fur textures that we're gonna do for this finished project for this unit. So up to you where you wanna go from here. I prefer going to this second lightest square next because it's easier than in my opinion, to be able to perceive like, okay, this is a little bit darker than this, and then going here because it's a little bit lighter, but basically just working from the outside in. Now we are ready for the second part of the activity, which is the actual water droplets themselves. So the requirement for this is that we do at least 5 water droplets and that we experiment with a couple different sizes. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to place one right here, and you can do this with a regular 2B pencil. That's what I'm using. So I'm planning out where things are gonna go. So I'll put one right there. I think I'm gonna have one right here, maybe a tiny little one right there. And then we need to add in an indication of where the shadow will go as well. And that's gonna be very important for how we develop the background. So the larger your bubble is, then the bigger the shadow will need to be. And for this example, I'm gonna have the light source coming from the right side. It's like right about here. So for this one, I would say the shadow needs to be about maybe this long. I think that's about how big the cast shadow would be for something like this. Whereas for this one, it's probably much, much smaller because there's not as much volume that the light is shining over. Okay, so another rule that these water droplets will follow is in this entire composition that we're gonna lay out, the only thing that is going to be pure white, like this value right here where we're pushing as hard as we can, is the highlight that is hitting right on the edge of the water droplet. So not on the very edge. It's not going to be right here. It's going to be inset very, very slightly because that would be the apex of this water droplet. It would be right here. And that is the first thing that I like to establish in the water droplet, because then I can make sure to be very careful not to let anything else in any other area get lighter than this point right here. Now I'm going to shift over to the other side and show how the light is passing through. So here I'll start with a value more like this. I'm going to push down a little bit harder. I'm going to avoid going all the way to the edge. So I'm trying to just stay closer to the center. All right, now when I get closer to the highlight right here, I'm going to do the best that I can to fade out into nothing. So obviously here we have these very distinctive transitions from one value to the next, but when we're actually shading something that looks naturalistic, it is going to imperceptibly fade like all of those different transitions that we would have between those values. That's what we're really trying to pick up on. And the best way to get that is through layering very gradually. And part of how I can show you that is I have this first layer completed, and you can really start to see the light to dark transition beginning to form. My second layer, I'm going to start by pushing a little harder because I do want this to be slightly lighter than it is. So I'm going to push down, maybe now aiming for around like here or here. So once we are at this point, we now need to shift into the background because it is looking more like the illusion of light, but you can't really tell that it's an orb kind of shape because we don't have that background established. So the goal for the background is going to be something that is, of course, darker than this lighter shade, but is going to be lighter than the shade around the edge. And it does help that we have preserved that so that it's going to be a little bit dark. All right, so with that, we have the background blocked in, and you can see what a big difference that makes for the illusion. Within our shadow, now that we really have that carved out by this outer value, I'm gonna go right to the middle here, and very carefully, I'm gonna create something like a bit of a zigzag that's coming out there. And I'm going really, really light with my pressure here because I still want that to be a shadow section. So that's good for now. And I'm going to move on to the other water droplets and just keep blocking this in. So that about wraps it up. I probably could enhance some of the highlights and continue working with this, but I'm gonna leave it here. One thing that I would definitely recommend that you guys do as you work this is prop it up on your desk and take a few steps back, maybe about 6 feet or so, and see how it looks from that distance, because sometimes the texture of this paper can really get in the way of you seeing how the whole illusion is coming together. And so it can show you like you're on the right track, this is how the illusion is really developing, or these are some areas that I might want to like push a little harder, get a nice highlight going, or you know, other areas that you might want to clarify. So once again, really good activity for understanding how this process works, and hopefully this video has helped you out in the process of creating it.
What's your name, girlfriend? What's your name? What's your name, girlfriend? What's your name? What's your